Last week at our concert with Dr. Pine, the closing hymn was one that's not in our hymnal, so some of you may not be as familiar with it. How sweet and awesome is the place. If you have a really old hymnal, it might have been sweet and awful is the place. The word awful used to be the word awesome. We don't really use it that way anymore. The last verse, the last verse, right? There's four. Is that how you read? I don't know anything about music anymore. I thought I did, and then I went to the workshop, and then I realized. Anyways, these are the words. I'm not going to sing it, obviously, but it says, "We long to see your churches full, that all the chosen race may, with one voice and heart, and should sing your redeeming grace." This hymn, at least, was credited in the hymnal to Isaac Watts in 1707. So just a few years ago, 316 to 15 years ago, 315 years ago, he wrote this hymn. And this came into my mind by way for the introduction, and I had to ask the question to Bethany, what's the hymn that says we long to see your churches full? And Bethany didn't know right off the top of her head, and then Abigail cheated and used Google and discovered that this is where it comes from. And it's I think a prayer of all our hearts, isn't it? We long to see your churches full. It's a sad state of affairs in any community if you added up the seating capacity of all the churches and then you looked at the population of the city. You'd get something like we see here in Cape Canaveral. And I don't know the official seating capacity of any of the churches, but I think if you took the 3 church buildings in the city that I am aware of, at least, the seating capacity doesn't reach 400 people. Depending on how many people. How many people can we get in here, Dr. Blizzard?
Well, if you open the doors, you can get probably about 170. Maybe.
How many?
About 170.
170. Wouldn't that be fun? What would the singing sound like if we had 170 people packed, and it would be packed in here? We thought we were full at Senate. We only had about 110 around. Let's shove in another 60 people. Cape Canaveral is a city, about 10,000 people year-round. Right now, there's more than that around us. 500 seats for 10,000 people. That's not very, very good math. Now, I'm not picking on our city here. I would venture to suppose that that's probably true in nearly every city in America, that the seating capacity just isn't there. And yet we still have empty pews. And so we long to see the churches full. But the question that I want to ponder a bit tonight is, why? What's the goal? What's the purpose of seeing the churches full? I just finished listening to a series, a podcast, which is sort of like radio journalism for the modern age, if you will, about a mega church. And I'm not going to name names just because I think it might distract from the point. But it was a church that grew up in a pagan city, was planted in a pagan city, rose to national and international prominence, and at one point boasted nearly 20,000 members. The pastor of that church went from wanting to just be the pastor of a church in a city to his stated goal became he wanted to become America's pastor. And if you're curious what that meant, for him that meant when a president got inaugurated, he wanted to be the one to get invited to pray at the inauguration. And he did the math and he calculated that all he had to do was have the biggest church in America, and his goals could be accomplished. So he set about to plant 50 campuses of 1,000 people each in various cities all up and down the western seaboard, because that would all be his church. And then he could be the pastor on the video screen that preached every Sunday, and he would be at one place, and this was his goal. Sadly, and this was a man who